For your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. And as long as I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Sitting here thinking about a podcast that I listened to yesterday, and I'm not sure if any of you guys have watched the, well, it's not on TV anymore, but it was the Duck Dynasty with Phil Robertson and his family. And I hope this wind doesn't, let me cover that up. Hopefully it's not going to sound horrible. Okay, so the other day I follow them on YouTube, and the other day I was listening, and they were talking about Phil, which is the dad, and I'll just give you a little bit of a background in case you're not familiar. But Phil was a super good looking man in his youth, and very intelligent, and went to college, could have been a professional football player, and was well liked by everybody, and all these good things. Well, Phil actually also was turned into a drunk and did drugs and everything, and his life was a mess. Well, there for like 10 years or so, he was pretty much in a fog, he said. I hope that's not... I'm going to go ahead and keep talking in hopes that it's not going to be too loud with the wind blowing. But anyway, so he said that he lived in a fog during that time. And he wasn't faithful to his wife, Miss Kay, at all. And they had, at the time, 3 little boys. I believe Al was probably, I'm going to say, maybe around 8 or 9, and Jace was 7, and when they were going through the darkest time as a family. And the reason I say that about their ages is Miss Kay was talking yesterday on another podcast that they were doing, explaining a little bit about the time frame of this, what happened in their lives, that they had no idea about until recently. So what happened is Phil, the dad, like I said, was unfaithful, and Miss Kay, his wife, put up with a whole lot of stuff at that time before he found salvation, before he came to Jesus. And that's what he talks about. He talks in his life about, you know how in history we say BC or AD, so before Christ or after death. And that's how Phil talks about his life before Jesus and after Jesus. Because when he found Jesus, he gave 100% of himself and totally changed everything. He actually did put away the old man and put on the new man. But this story that I'm about to tell you, to me, shows the goodness and the mercy of God. Even though Phil admits to admitting sin, he wasn't saved at that time. He wasn't a Christian. And, so those things in Jesus' eyes, God's eye, they are wiped away. So Phil had an affair. I don't know if it was a one-time thing. The way they talked about it, it probably was. But because of that affair, a child was born that Phil never heard about, never knew about. She's 45 years old. Her name is Phyllis. Now, her mommy knew who the dad was, and that's why she called her Phyllis, after Phil. But she never told her daughter about Phil. Matter of fact, her daughter was made to believe that she had the same dad that her siblings did. Well, she didn't. And the way they found out is Phyllis, one of her children, I believe, went and had a DNA test done. And some of the things didn't line up with what they had always been told. DNA, of course, is very accurate, and it will pull people together that might not even have known ever that they were related or that they were, you know, in this life, in this world. So she decided, she talked to her sister and talked to a few good friends, and decided that she was going to go ahead and have a DNA test herself. Well, when she was a young child, and all through her growing up years, Phyllis always wondered, she felt like she was different than her family, and I guess she lived a pretty rough life as far as maybe financially. They didn't get into a lot of that on that podcast, but I kind of took it as things were not easy for Phyllis growing up. So she went and had the DNA test, and when she found out and she started following along those lines, she wondered. It started opening up doors that she was like kind of shocked about. And so she had a talk with her sister and her brother, and she told them that she had always felt different, like, part of the family, but not really. Like there was something that was not being said. And she was absolutely right. She wasn't raised in church. Her dad and mom didn't go to church. Her family didn't go to church. Her grandparents didn't go to church. But yet Phyllis always loved to go to church. She would go with her friends. She would walk when she was young just to get into the house of the Lord. And never having been raised in church, I thought, what a beautiful story that God was writing. Even though it was a sin that Phil committed, God can use our sins or our wrongs and turn things into a beautiful story. So let me continue. To me, this is so exciting, and I hope that you guys are enjoying it, and I hope that I'm going to do it justice by being able to explain it to you in a way that is you'll understand it. So Phyllis went and had that done, found out, like I said, that she had a different family somewhere. Her dad was different than her siblings was. And so she started digging a little bit and trying to find out things. Now, Phyllis and her family, her husband and her two sons, had been in the missions field. They didn't say where or where they lived or anything like that, but they were in the missions field for 5 of the years that Duck Dynasty was on TV. They had no way of seeing that show. They had never watched it. Didn't really even know anything about it. She said she remembered hearing about it, maybe seeing a photo in a magazine maybe, or I don't know, maybe a commercial. But she had no idea who those people were, what they stood for, what the show is about. And that is so amazing. And the reason being, to me, it's amazing because she had no idea what the people were like. And if she would have had preconceived ideas of what they were like and what their personalities were like, then maybe she wouldn't have been able to bond with them the way that she has. If you're watching a TV program that is the producers are all involved in, and a lot of times when on a TV show, especially something that is done like what are they called when it's supposed to be like real life happening, a lot of times like that, those people are directed to do a certain thing or to act a certain way. Well, For instance, Jace, the second son, he in real life likes to get deep, and he likes to get talking about the Lord, and he loves to teach about Jesus and all of those things. But on the show, he was more portrayed as a funny character, always up to doing something funny. And every time that he would get a little serious on the show, it would be edited out. Now, that's what Jace told us yesterday in that podcast. So if Phyllis, his actual sister, if she had been watching those, she wouldn't have really known the true and real Jace, her brother. She would have thought of him always as being just this goofball. So Phyllis decides, with the help of a pastor, I think, and her friends and the family that supported her, she decided that she was going to write a letter. And she had a lot of prayers from all different people and a lot of help in how to write this letter in a way. She wanted to only bring glory to God. She didn't want anything from this family. She said that if it would have brought any pain at all to Miss Kay, Phil's wife, that she wanted it to stop. She didn't want to do anything further. She did not want to bring her pain. And I thought that really spoke volumes about that woman and how her character is. So she wrote the letters, and she sent one to, she sent one to the church that Al, the oldest boy, pastors at. She sent one, she took one. Jay speaks and speaks all over, the country. And he talks about the Lord. Matter of fact, years ago, when they were, really at the height of their careers, Steve and I had the chance to go to a huge church down in Columbus, Ohio. And so we got to hear Jace speak. It was great. He did a phenomenal job, and I'll never forget it. We weren't allowed to take pictures or bring cameras or anything, but the memory is up here. I'll never forget it. I really, really respected him a lot. So anyway, his sister Phyllis also heard that Jace was going to be speaking, and she had done enough internet searches to find out that he was actually going to be speaking at his brother's church. Now, there's a long story to that, how it all happened, but it was all done by God. It was orchestrated by the perfect master. And so you can go to the podcast or find out more about that if you would like. But so he was there, and his dad was going to be preaching. Phil was going to be preaching. Phyllis was going to actually go into this church without anybody knowing that she was there. She was going to hear her dad preach the word of the gospel. And she went. She said she went into the church. She had a letter for Phil, and she wanted to give him that letter, but she said that he had people all around him. He had security, and you got to figure that they are a wealthy, very wealthy family. They might not look it with their big old beards and yeah, and I'm not cutting down beards because God knows everybody in my family just about has one, but they're not the picture of what you would see as somebody with money, put it that way. Now their wives are gorgeous, but anyway, so she couldn't. She thought to herself, I can't go up there and give him this letter. I don't know, those guys are probably packing. They might not even let me near him, which they said during the podcast that they wouldn't have. They would have not, the guards would not have allowed her to get close to Phil to give him the letter. And you guys got to understand that they would get constant letters and letters and letters and cards and people asking for things. So there was a reason why they protected him. And he's getting older, and they didn't want him to have to fool with any nonsense. They didn't know what was going on. So because of that, she decided she was going to give Phil's letter to Jace, because Jace, the second born son, actually had, he was out like mingling with the crowd after the service. And she said she remembered him being very, very polite. And he took the letter, and you guys have to know Jace. He's a good man, but he is very forgetful. Trying to block that wind. So that letter, needless to say, sat in his bag that he carries for these speaking assignments, you know. And I don't know how long it sat in that bag. But she ended up sending a letter to the church. And Al, the oldest brother, got the letter and he read it. He wasn't sure what he was going to do. Talked to Jace, his brother. Jace said, well, I got a letter from, some lady. So they pull out the letter and they read the letter and they find out it's the same thing. Well, they didn't want to go to their mom and dad and talk to them about it. They wanted to find some things out first. So they did their own little snooping and found out a little bit about Phyllis. And they decided then that they were going to go talk to their dad and their mom about this. Okay, so at this time, I'm not sure if they had a discussion. They might have had a discussion, the two brothers, with their two youngest brothers, which are Willie and Jeb. And Jeb he's actually younger than Phyllis. So they ended up going and talking to Phil, and he said, so what do I got to do to find out if this is true or not? And they told him, well, Dad, you got to have a DNA, and you'll probably have to end up having one of those tests, paternity tests, to find out if she really is, your daughter. He said, let's get it done. So they did. The test came back that she was 99.9% his daughter. And Miss Kay said all of their married life, after all them hard times, she would tell Phil after he found Jesus that she had a feeling that all along something like this was going to happen, but Miss Kay thought it would be a boy that would be coming back and saying that, Phil was his dad. And here it was a daughter, and Miss Kay always wanted a daughter. She didn't think Phil could produce daughters. But it was a beautiful story, you guys. And I started thinking last night, there's a plane. I guess that was a garbage truck, not a plane. But anyway, I started thinking last night as I was watching that. Things could have totally turned out different for everybody in that family. If Phil had not accepted Christ as his Savior, he probably would have still been, maybe he wouldn't have even been here now. He would have already been passed away. But he probably still would have been drinking. He still probably would have maybe been mixed up in bad things. And probably most definitely he wouldn't have had Miss Kay still by his side supporting him. And the children, Jace, the second one, like I said, his mom, Miss Kay, was talking about when they were young and Jace was 7. Phil came in and he had been drinking, and he grabbed her by the hair of the head, and Jace, at 7 years old, climbed on top of his dad's back and beat on him and told him to stop hurting his mommy. And that's how those children lived before Jesus came into Phil's heart. So this is what I'm telling you. That touched me to the very core of my being. How much different our lives could be if we accept Christ. And that's how my life has been. It made me think back. What would have I been into? Would have I even been here? What would have my life been if I wouldn't have accepted Christ as my Savior at a young age? And this is what this story was all about. It's the young girl never knew that she had a different father. And when she met him, they spoke one-on-one for 45 minutes. And Phil said, now Phil's not a real lovey-touchy man. He's real serious, but he's funny too. But he said he held her face in his hands. and stared into her eyes. He wanted to see a part of himself in her, and he did. And I thought, oh my gosh, it just reminds me of someday when we get to heaven, is Jesus gonna take us by our face and stare us in the eye and just say, yes, you are my child. You are my daughter. And that's how Phil felt. Phil knew that she was his. And it was like she had never not been. They have a bond, and the whole family has bonded with her. And I'm telling you, it is a touching, beautiful story when you see the grace, the goodness, the mercy, the love, and how God orchestrated it all. See, he took something that was sinful and painful, and he turned it into something beautiful. And that's what Jesus does. God does that for us. So, yeah, the birds are loud, and Steve's down there with the sawing up that tree. But I wanted to share that. I felt like if it touched me that much, I hope that it touches somebody out there. So if you're down or you're thinking that your life is not what it should be or whatever, then straighten up. Get on the right path and see what God can do for you. Or if you're just down and you've made, you are a Christian and you just needed a pick-me-up, look back and think what God has done for you. It's amazing. It is amazing. And I wish them nothing but love for the rest of all their lives. She's going to get some blessings that she never knew existed. I guarantee it. They have money, and I hope now that she, well, I know by just listening to her talk, she'll be the type of person that will definitely share the goodness. And I'm guaranteeing you that you're going to hear her telling this story. Maybe on podcasts, maybe at churches near you. And I would say go listen, because it's going to encourage your heart. That's what we need to do. In times like the times we're living in right now, yeah, we all need encouragement. And that encouraged me, and it made me so thankful for the salvation that God has planned and gave to me. And I accepted when I was a young girl. So have a great day. I hope that you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. And just leave your thoughts down below. Maybe leave below what God has done for you that it wouldn't have happened if it had not been. Okay? So thanks so much for listening, and I love you all. Have a great, great day.